Attitude dictates everything. It drives the way you think and feel, and off the back of that, it drives the way you act.
Greg Alexander, thanks for making the time.
My pleasure. Thanks for the invite. Happy to be here.
How's it going over there?
Yeah, it's definitely strange times. It's uncertain times for our sport, and it's uncertain times just for daily lives. My wife's an emergency nurse, so she's working most days. She's very busy right now. I've assumed the role of home school teacher with our 3 kids. We're homeschooling, and it's a challenge not unlike an Ironman, to be honest.
How old are the kids?
Our eldest is about to turn 15 in a month. Our son, who's number 2, he's 11 in 3 weeks, and our baby just turned 7 about a month ago. We're trying to shelter them as best we can, but I think it's important they understand what's going on as well, and they do.
We've talked a lot to athletes in the past couple of days, but you've got a bit of a unique perspective on things, I would reckon. You're a coach. You are the team captain for the Collins Cup for International. What do you actually expect? Like, what do you tell your athletes? When do you think they'll be racing again or not?
You can't tell them with any certainty when they'll be racing again. But I think you've just got to look at the glass half full and not half empty. I mean, I always feel as an athlete having more time to prepare is an advantage, not a disadvantage. So at some point, these athletes are going to be towing the start line. We know that. That's a fact. I think there's so many unknowns that creates a lot of fear and hysteria. But at some point, we know life will get back to some semblance of normal. It may never resemble what it was in terms of the way we have to travel and things like that. But, you know, things happen, and you've just got to roll with it. You've got to, there's no point losing sleep over things that you can absolutely not control. What other things you can control? I mean, I know if I was an athlete now with big races on the horizon at some point, I would be working on efficiency, technique, strength and conditioning, all the things that you can, given the confines and the environment that you find yourself in. And, you know, that's a long checklist. That's a long list. So try and stay positive. Now, at some point, you will get to showcase your talents on a global stage, and make sure you're ready.
I really like the view on things. Is that something you can use with your athletes, or like, are you having those conversations with your athletes at the moment as well? Do you have some that need the chat and a little bit of an eye opener?
Yeah, I mean, I think as an older athlete, you know, I have helped and mentored a lot of younger athletes the same way I received that from when I, you know, started in the sport as a 21-year-old. There was a lot of older athletes who took me under their wing, and I think that's one of the great things I've noticed in triathlon, actually. Through the generations and between the generations, there's a lot of mentoring of athletes from one generation to the next generation. It's one of the very cool things about triathlon. So it's funny, you know, as you get older, and I remember being a young athlete and a young man, people telling me about how valuable experience was. And I think with the passage of time, what you learn is, well, I guess you just gain more experiences and more knowledge, but you also see how quickly time passes as well. And you see in the blink of an eye, a month goes past, a season goes past, a decade goes past, and you think, where did that go? And that's, I think, professionally within your career, but also personally with your marriage, with your kids. You know, things change. Your kids grow up so quickly, and you think, where did that time go? So if experience has taught me anything, is that time rolls on, and you just got to roll with it and be ready.
Absolutely. You said you were 21 when you got into the sport. Was there like that one athlete or a handful of athletes that to you were the guys were like, yeah, they're worth listening to?
I met Greg early in my career. I met McKeely, and it was very obvious who were the athletes to listen to, not only from their results, but I think more importantly from the way they handled themselves in training, just the way they went about their business. You could see who was just very professional, very sharp. And all those great athletes had something in common. You know, they had their own unique spin to the training. They interacted with people that they respected as well. So they weren't just an island, not taking advice from others. So I saw that. I saw these world-class athletes seeking out expert help as well. And I think that impacted me, that you had to surround yourself with good people. And so for me, that was the first step, was jumping in these training rides and watching from afar how the top people did it. But, you know, in the mid-90s, it was a different atmosphere. It's sort of a fun, I mean, it was still their profession, but there was, I guess, more of an air of fun to it. And the older athletes were willing to help the younger guys and girls out. And that's what I remember. I mean, even getting called into my first Australian team training camp, Welshie was there, Jackie Gallagher was there. There were a lot of multiple world champions, but you had a lot of younger athletes. Greg Bennett was there, Craig Walton, Chris Hill, myself, Loretta Harrop, Joanne King, Nikki Hackett. It was a lot of athletes who went on to be world champions and Olympic medalists, and we all used to train together, sort of, I guess, in a team environment, trying to help each other. So certainly different times to now. But to answer your question, it was very obvious who were the athletes that you wanted to learn from, because they had that unique combination of great results, but also just a uniqueness in the way they went about it, and not an arrogance, but a confidence and underlying self-belief, but also a willingness to learn.
I love it how you call your career a decent one. A lot of people would argue that you're one of the greatest of all times and you've won a lot of nominations and awards and everything for your career. But from your point of view, can you pick a greatest of all times or like a top three out there?
Well, McKeely has to be in the conversation. McKeely Jones, I think, an Olympic medal, multiple world championship victories, drafting and non-drafting. Danny Reef, Danny has to be in the conversation. I think she's got, 4 Konas and 570.3 world titles. That's 9 championship victories. That's pretty special. And it's tough. I mean, how do you leave out Erin Baker? How do you leave out Karen Smyers? She won an ITU World Championship and Hawaii in the same year. How do you leave out Emma Snowsell?
There's just tough. Too many of them. Just too many of them. I'll make the question a little easier for you. If all of the top Australian men, let's say the world champions and podiums and Kona and so on, would race each other, each at their peak, who would win?
I mean, I have to say myself, because I think you would expect that of any athlete of our level to say that. You have to believe that on your best day, you're going to be a handful for anyone. To your earlier question, though, if we're looking at just any nationality, any distance, I mean, Mark Allen's got to be in the conversation. Simon Lessing has to be in the conversation. How do you leave out Alistair Brownlee? I mean, for me, he's incredible. Javier Gomez as well. 5 ITU World Championships, an Xterra World Championship. Talk about versatility. And of course, Jan. I mean, Jan has put together arguably the greatest career if you're looking at just winning big races across all distances and the races that matter in our sport. And it's a fun conversation to have, though, isn't it? I mean,
it's an interesting one, and so much more to come. I mean, you mentioned Jan, so now there's your honours as the oldest Ironman world champion in serious danger in the next couple of years if he keeps burning. As you said, Alistair just beginning to play with a long distance. You mentioned the versatility. I'm looking forward to see what a Flora Duffy coming from Xterra and so on can do in the future. Definitely exciting times coming, that's for sure. But let's talk a little bit about you.
I felt the sport for me was almost a personal journey. It was a challenge that I'd set myself to be the best athlete I could be. That was what was driving me. That was always my motivation. The greatest attribute or characteristic you can have is a self-awareness, knowing what it is that pushes your buttons, that gets you going. And for me, that was my training, getting very fit in training, laying down some decent numbers in training. I didn't have to sit at the press conference or in an interview and be overly dramatic. I was probably a boring interview for the most part because I was all business. For me, it was all about the racing. It's funny, you hear all these sessions that different athletes do and everyone thinks it might be crazy. If that athlete actually thinks it's working, it's very powerful.
I'm looking forward to chatting, for example, to a guy like Lionel, with the reputation of training he has. Has he even realized yet that there's something going on in the world outside right now? I mean, nothing in his training has probably changed at all.
He trains a lot inside, Lionel. And again, it's each to their own. It seems to work. I mean, he's had a great career. I'm a huge fan. I'm a huge fan of Lionel's. He's mentally tough, but to do the kind of workloads he does indoors, he's a workhorse. He's great for the sport. He's, I guess, kind of polar opposite to Jan, I guess, in terms of Jan's got the pedigree, came up through the German Federation, great swimming background, beautiful technique, and mentally tough as well. Don't get me wrong. I mean, you don't win what Jan's won without having the mentality to match that physicality, but I think it's good for the sport to have, sort of different characters like that. Lionel certainly, for me, makes the races interesting, as does Jan. I mean, I'll watch any race that those two guys are in.
Oh, 100%. I'm glad we got those unique characters.
Yeah.
Like for me, I keep thinking about Sebastian Kienle. I love the way that he came
Yeah.
to the top of the sport. Like when he couldn't run for his life, he would still approach every half distance run like he's a 10K runner and then explode after 15K, but build up on that. I love those characters, and I'm looking forward to when we're back out racing to throw them all in the mix at an event like the Collins Cup. So international is very unique. Whilst US and Europe has 2 coaches each, you have 4. Is that an advantage or a disadvantage?
No, I think it's an advantage. Again, I like to look at the glass half full. But I will say, I mean, the countries that are involved, New Zealand, Canada, Australia, South Africa, we're all quite similar culturally and mentally. I know we share a lot in common. I know the South African athletes are super tough. You look at Conrad Stoltz comes to mind, James Kunema, Richard Murray. Those athletes, they know how to push themselves. So I think we have a lot in common. And I think we'll all be coming together for a common goal. I like the concept of it. From the team sports that you observe from afar in those team events, you just see the camaraderie that they build, and they just grow an extra leg for each other. So it'll be awesome. It's going to be a great dynamic, and yeah, we're similar in all the best ways. So I think we're going to have a very strong team, and yeah, I'm pumped for it. It's going to be awesome.
I feel very confident for Europe, obviously, as a German.
Yeah.
I mean, just look at long distance racing.
There's no question Team Europe are the hot favourites, but we're not flying all the way over there just to make up the numbers. And it's one of the great things about our sport, all the athletes from all the countries. It's one thing I've loved, how competitive the sport of triathlon is, how global it is. And it's going to be some great racing.